Noble Lords will want, like me, to thank the public sector for their continued dedication and for what they do day in and day out. As my noble friend Lord Livermore informed your Lordship's House last year during a similar OQ, the government inherited a situation where public sector productivity remained 6.4% below pre-pandemic levels. This is clearly unacceptable. Our focus is on fundamental reform of our public services to drive greater efficiency and productivity. Further details will be set out in next week's spring statement and the forthcoming spending review.
I thank the Minister for a response, but I'm rather perplexed. If economic growth is the government's top priority, why is it failing to conduct a full and proper assessment of the impact of working from home across the public sector, not least because the 7% fall in public sector productivity since the pandemic has coincided with a surge in remote working. And there are key questions to answer, whether it's by sector or by job function, for both management and their employees, especially the young. It's not a one-size-fits-all issue, as the private sector is rapidly discovering. So can the Minister explain why the government remains so resistant to learning?
Well, I thank the Noble Lord for his question. I'm sorry, I just don't agree with the sentiment behind it. In the budget last year, the Chancellor announced a £100 million public sector reform and innovation fund, which has established a trust and learn approach about how we can deliver public service reform. And, my Lords, I think we should be very clear that, according to the CIPD, 60% of the overwhelming majority of private sector organisations also now operate hybrid working at 60%, which is the same level as the public service and the same level as the civil service.
If we're going to raise public service productivity, we've clearly got to tackle training and skills. I deeply regret that the coalition government sold off the National School of Government, and over the last 15 years, much of the training for our public services has been outsourced, often to management consultancies. What is the government doing to bring training back in-house and to make sure that there is upskilling for the whole of the public service done on a fully professional basis?
My Lords, this government is absolutely committed to the reprioritisation of our workforce in terms of delivering frontline services, which will require ongoing upskilling and training. In terms of bringing it in-house, I look forward to ongoing conversations with my noble friend, the Minister, who's sitting to my right, about how we will collectively work together across government to deliver it.
My Lords, isn't the answer to the Noble Lord Lawnsborough's question as to why the government are not tackling this problem the same as why their policy is being changed on schools, why their whole approach to employment policy is being changed, is because this government is run by the trade unions.
My Lords, I think many General Secretaries of trade unions would wish that to be the case. As a former trade union officer, I am very proud that this government is embedded and wedded to Labour and trade union values. One of the things, however, that we are doing is working with our trade unions to deliver a plan for change to make sure that flexible working and our new normal, I think Noble Lords will appreciate we are now 5 years on from the pandemic when we had 80% of the workforce working from home. We now have a new normal, and as we look to see what people's expectations are and how we can deliver on those and on the delivery of our core mission of economic growth, that we can work with all partners, trade unions and employers, to deliver it.
My Lords, flexible working can give great benefits both to employees and employers, and in particular in the public sector. But will my noble friend consider the importance of making sure that there are times at which people do attend work where they can in person, not least to build the sort of teamwork and camaraderie, particularly for younger workers who at the beginning of their careers need to benefit from personal up-close experience with their more senior colleagues?
The Noble Lord raises a very important point. I think most of us in your Lordship's House benefited from being in workplaces so that we could be mentored and learn from those people who are more experienced. I definitely do every day in your Lordship's House. In terms of making sure that people working from home, I think the easiest example for me to give, working in the office, the easiest example for me to give is the civil service, who now are required, as the previous government established, to work in 60% of their time in office environments in order to ensure that institutional knowledge is passed on both ways, both from new starters to those more experienced, but also from those more experienced to learn from new approaches to the world in which we live.
Does the noble...
Lords, we heard what the Noble Baroness, the Minister, said about working with the unions. Last month, the FDA Civil Service Union published their findings that almost 2/3 of the staff they surveyed felt having to work in the office 3 days a week decreased their productivity. Will the Noble Baroness, the Minister, confirm whether the FDA's findings tally with the government's own official analysis of the impact of the 3-day in-office rule?
My honourable friend in the other place, Pat McFadden, has been clear that we want to ensure that people are working in the office. We genuinely believe that there is social capital developed from having office-based approaches, and we are committed to retaining 60% of staff in the office during their contracts. I think we also should reflect on the fact that one of the opportunities this has also given the state is that we've been able, to consolidate the estate, and one example of which is 1 Victoria Street, which was recently sold, has saved annual savings of £30 million a year. This gives us an opportunity in terms of hybrid working, but also ensuring that we're getting most value for money for the public purse.
Does the noble lady agree that her impact in the division lobby would be much decreased if she was online? Does she also agree that in important meetings, the impact of everyone being in the same room is much better than when part of the meeting is online? And does she agree that we should apply that standard to select committee meetings in this House?
My Lords, I am not brave enough to answer the final point. With regards to my performance in the division lobby, I think most noble lords have now experienced that, and I can either apologise or be grateful for my performance. In terms of online working and how we use technology, personally, I benefit from sitting in the same room during meetings. I definitely absorb more. But noble lords will be aware that I also do a great deal of work with the Northern Ireland office, and all of our meetings have to be hybrid because of where people are, and that is the case for most of us who are operating in government. Our officials are spread, so to make sure we hear regional voices and national voices from our nations and regions, it's really important that we operate a variety of different technologies.
My Lords, returning to the earlier question that was asked about skills and training, would my noble friend talk to her noble friend on the front bench and to Pat McFadden and Georgia Gould in the Commons about re-establishing a new form of civil service college, which could be done with a confederation of universities at a fraction of the price that was going to be charged by EY until this government stopped it back in July.
My noble friend knows how inordinately fond I am of him, and I am very aware that it is always a bad idea to disagree with him. So on that basis, I will have all of those conversations.
The Minister agreed that there's a big difference between those civil servants who are working as researchers or analysts and those who are public-facing, like HMRC, Passport Office, DVLA. Now, on the HMRC agenda, she's aware that this organisation has underperformed in terms of answering telephones and dealing with the public. Can she tell the House how it's getting on at the moment?
I thank Noble for his question. He's absolutely right to raise it. In 23 to 24, HMRC answered only 66.4% of phone calls when customers wanted to speak to an advisor. I'd like to update the House that in Q3 of last year, which is the most recent figures we have, handling was 85%, so we are making significant advancements. And one of the things that's been most effective is that we are now dealing with the majority of people on their first call and dealing with their answer on that point. And 80% of customer correspondence is now being issued within 15 days.
My Lords, for a special inquiry on home-based learning, of which I'm a member, is finding evidence from private sector employers that they are looking at innovative ways to measure productivity, but more importantly, to see what happens in the kind of telephone call that you've just referred to, because accurate information isn't always given. So what plans does the government have to measure productivity in a more sophisticated way for public sector workers working from home?
The Noble Lady raises a really important point, and it is something that the government is currently reflecting on in terms of how we should do it. I would like to highlight to all Noble Lords that the House of Lords Select Committee on Home-Based Working currently has a call out for evidence which closes on the 25th of April, and we look forward to seeing their report in November to reflect on their recommendations.